Ah, Commander, there you are. Finally, the ship is ready. Sorry it's taken so long. There are so many guns to clean, it's unbelievable. Well, that's fueled up, ready for you to take out into the black. Jimmy, what are you doing there? Excuse me, Commander. And if that is what you're after, effectively a missile with guns attached to it, then you need look no further than the Federal Corvette. Let's go have a look at it. And here we are in our familiar position in the commander's seat. Now, just to orientate, the grab handles are slightly out of reach. I'd probably be touching the corner of that one. I'd have to reach over here to touch the corner of that one. But from the sitting position, I could definitely run my hand on the underside of the roof section. In terms of the cab itself, or the cabin, cockpit, whatever you want to call it. Hello, Commander Headless. It's freaky, as always. I'll never get used to that. It's definitely smaller than the Anaconda, but it's still very substantial indeed. So let's go and start having a bit of a look around. One thing you'll notice immediately at the front is that the dash is actually very low. So if I was to stand right up against the dash, it would actually come up to here. So it's a very, very low dash, which I don't know whether that translates in 2D. I don't think it does. And then of course there's that whole huge area out the front, which again, smaller, possibly a slight bit shorter than the Anaconda, although I wouldn't actually, no, it's probably about the same. In terms of the size of those little areas, I'll probably get into a bit more detail from an external camera, but certainly the width of that, well, see how down the bottom there's like a middle center section? That would be wide enough to park a car on. So that gives you an idea of how big that actually is. And that front section right in front of us there, just as the ledge falls off, that section there would actually probably accommodate a small car and a 6x4 trailer, just lengthways. In terms of widthways, it would probably be about the same again in terms of width where that channel is. I don't know why they did that. I guess aesthetically it looks cool, but it's a tremendous waste of space that could have housed another 4 hardpoints. I don't know. Obviously there was a reason for it, but it seems like a big open empty hole. And in terms of the depth of that space, I would say it's probably a good 6 feet, so about to my head height if I was standing down on those rails where the car would fit. Now looking forward here, so we have these really cool sort of gem-like, almost tiger eye kind of projectors. They're a bit low res, but they actually do curve up quite a bit and stick up out of the dash, which looks really cool. This center projector is about 60 centimeters in diameter, and the rest of the dash actually looks really cool because of these orange lights. Now, as you know, I run a blue heads-up display because I hate orange, but the orange flashes here actually look really awesome. The dash itself is inlaid with carbon fiber and plasticky metal-y kind of stuff, as we have seen many times before, and much of it looks like it could open or do stuff, but simply does not. If we walk around to the front of the dash, you can see it sort of ends fairly abruptly, but it looks like a really nice little console, finished even in the front, albeit in matte black. Down the very bottom here, we have a Core Dynamics logo, and underneath, it just sort of comes up into a fairly plain pedestal kind of thing, holding the rest of the dash up. I know you guys laugh at me when I lie on the ground, but the first thing I did when I got into Elite Dangerous in my friend's house was lie down on the ground and crawl around like an idiot because I wanted to see these things that I'm now showing you. This potentially is a grab handle, but again, it's like 1.5 to 2 feet off the ground, so I'm not sure who would be grabbing onto that except for a small child or a hobbit. And that whole thing is repeated on the other side with nothing else really to mention other than the fairly nice materials. Here's a hexagonal pattern kind of carbon fiber situation, again reflecting the light blue color from the heads-up display, which looks really nice. And up here another version of that, maybe a slightly more matted version, and again the end of the cockpit there. Now moving backwards from the commander's chair, if I was to be touching it here and the headrest is there, it's sitting on an unmovable plinth, and again, as per previous videos, you can see that the commander's chair is actually placed a bit too far backwards. It should be moved another maybe 4 inches forward so that it sits in that actual divot. Not sure what's going on there. A tiny little step down here, which hardly is worth a mention, although, yes, although it is floating off the ground somewhat. Up above the commander there aren't any sort of cubbies or hidey holes. It's a fairly sleek and all business kind of cockpit, I would say, in totality. and that's reflected above as well. Those grab handles there that you could almost but not quite reach from the seating position, and you can see the whole thing slants down quite violently towards the front. Now in terms of the space in the cockpit here, if I'm here touching the commander's chair, I'd have to walk sort of to about here to then be touching the edge of this co-pilot's console. So certainly smaller than some of the cockpits we've seen before, but still a large amount of space, arguably wasted, in the middle between the commander and the pilot seats. As you know, occasionally I like to look in Holo-Me just to see where it actually zaps the commander so that perhaps we get better access to some parts of the ship. It hasn't done that in this instance, but it has done something extraordinarily hilarious that you'll see as soon as I turn around. Are you ready? Well, that's what the commander's doing. So, so the commander's not spun around, the chair has spun around and sunk into the ground. Yeah. That's pretty fantastic. I would suggest that is one of the weirdest ways that I have ever seen the commander move in Holo-Me. But there you are. I guess the one benefit is an unadulterated view of the commander's back sitting down. Okay. Now I'll get back to looking at the pilot's chairs in more detail in a second, but I just managed to zap myself right to the back panel of the cockpit here. So we'll have a quick look at that before we move on. An extreme floaty here. I don't know what that's supposed to be. Perhaps a speaker or an emitter of some description, but certainly not realistic. And then this very low-level schematic nowadays, actually of the Corvette from above, which is nice. And then there's this center disc is kind of floating ever so slightly off the back panel. But other than that, it's a low-res texture as we have come to expect. Over here, much of a muchness with another display that is low res again. And over here, as we walk towards the rear and effectively down the stairs, we come to just the rear section of this cockpit, which really is only about 2.5 meters across at the rear, and it splays outwards to be about 3 meters wide at this point, at the point of the stairs. You can see very slightly through the stairs themselves to the floor, so not a complete texture, but again, you're not supposed to look at it from this direction. Sorry, Frontier, I'm breaking your game here. And there's a bit of a approximately 3 by 2 or 2.5 by 2 foot storage locker. And the door at the back here, which I cannot get to, but you can see is kind of glitching its own texture, but it is definitely, 6.5, maybe 7 foot tall. Got a D1 controller open to close, presumably, and has the same stuff written on it that every other door has written on it. The other side is just a carbon copy of the previous side, so nothing else really to see back here. However, I might take the opportunity to stick my head through the floor here and give you your first glance of the rear/interior of the Corvette. And you can see that it is effectively just full of hardpoints. You can see the 2 huge hardpoints there at the rear, which take up, the majority of the space of the rear of the Corvette itself. Some lovely low-level textures coming up towards the front underneath where the cockpit actually is, and the fighter bay directly below us with some very low-res sort of wall just in front of it for some unknown reason. And the cargo bay there in front, and then the landing gear, and then more hard points. This thing is just covered in them. And you can see there, if I lie down, another hard point poking its little head out there, and some of those low res textures taking up the space between the hard point and the landing gear, and between the hard point and the fighter bay. And just before I get to the pilot seats, if we jank ourselves outside of the Corvette itself from the interior view, which, as you know, we're not supposed to see, you get some weird clipping stuff happening up the top there with textures being see-through, but it gives you an idea of how far back the commander sits from the, the dash and the window itself. And you can also see how low that roof is to the commander themselves, so you could reach up and touch it. And a same but different view of the same thing, again gives you that impression nicely. Most of this you can't see in 2D because it simply won't let you get outside of the play space as far as I currently am. So here is the view from ship Pilot 1 and their dash. You can see that they also have a low-res readout of something, which we can't actually read, but that does look familiar to some other readouts in previous videos. Not sure exactly which ones. There is a twisted version of that bit over there, and nothing else that you can really discern anything from. Some nice brushed aluminium finishes off the dash nicely, and then you have effectively a repeat of the information over here as a direct flipped copy by the looks of things, or at least mostly. There is this area as well over here that looks like you could stand in and do some stuff, but seeing as though there's only 2 extra pilots, I'm not sure why you would actually be in this area. Maybe it's a maintenance console or something like that. But certainly, the same sort of readouts. That tiger eye seems to be rolled up in its head and has died. As with this one, actually, that's all gone a bit weird. There's a little floating iPad kind of thing on this central pillar, which I always thought it was a bit strange because you've got this nice sort of strut system in front of this guy, or girl, and over there you've got nothing. So, yep, weird, but there you go. So this little iPad kind of thing that sits there, a repeat of it on the other side and around the back. Those 2 sides have displays, the other side does not. And then we have some nice long grab handles, probably about 2 feet in length, but certainly usable by a human hand. And from this seat, we have a nice view through that weird meshed hole through to the commander, and also over there to the other co-pilot, whose view we'll see now. And here is the view from co-pilot 2. You can see that they have a bit more of a traditional sitting on an arm kind of console with readouts that don't do anything but sort of look like they should be doing something. The uplink active satellite scan scheduled, and just a Core Dynamics logo on the corner there. And in the corner again, some low res panels that perhaps somebody could stand here and use for some unknown reason. Okay, great, but really the main event of this thing is its firepower and flying ability and the fact that it has a fighter bay. So as we launch from Mars High, let's have a look at these 2 landing gear at the rear and see what they actually do as we head out. The landing gear themselves on this one are probably only about a story and a half in terms of height. It seems like all the landing gear fold in exactly the same way, sort of up and then lift their toe up into the air. I always do like watching the fighters deploy on these things. So there goes the Condor directly below where the commander is. And out she goes.
Fighter successfully deployed, Commander.
I don't know why I like this bit so much. I guess there's so many moving parts in the fighter bay that it actually looks really cool. Now, some of you may not have seen my Condor video. Have a look at that one if you want to have a review of this particular fighter. But you have seen on some of the previous videos, including the Anaconda one, that there's some pretty cool stuff you can do in terms of getting close to things if you're in a fighter like this and you manage to jank it so that it works. So I've jumped out here, sort of walking in front of the fighter itself, just so you can see the interior of the the Corvette cockpit from this vantage point, which is always a bit weird. Look, I'll nearly stand by it. It's probably a little bit too narrow, that small section in the middle for a car, but it's pretty close. So I'll stand by a little bit. As we move out towards the front, you can see there's some hoses and piping and stuff in the next little area. And it just keeps going and going and going. And then there is another area there, which seems to not want to light up. Oh, there we go. With some presumably escape pods or something. No, that's heat sinks, isn't it? No, never mind. Now, interestingly, I'm sure you can see it there. There is actually a corridor here. So we're just near the front of the Corvette. And there is a corridor sitting here underneath. It is not human height, but it is human width. So it's probably about 1 meter in terms of width, but height-wise, it's only about 1 meter and a bit high. So certainly the person's feet would be sticking out the bottom of the Corvette should they be walking there. So that doesn't work all that well. See if I can stick my head through there. There we are. So sticking my head through there, you can see the interior of the texture, I guess, for want of a better word, of the corridor, and it is probably only about 1.5 meters high. Right, moving forward from there, you can see we can sort of jank our head into the bottom of the Corvette. So here we are near one of the utility mounts, which I'll try and head towards. There we go. So there you are. So that one is, yeah, it's probably about 80 to 90 centimeters by about 80 to 90 centimeters. So yeah, there it says manual release in low texture, which is pretty cool. But again, you don't get to stick your head inside these. There's another sticker that says manual release. That sounds very suggestive. Now here we're coming towards the cargo bay there above us. And let's see if I can get any closer to that before it kills itself. There we are. So I've shoved my head through into the cargo bay itself. You've seen this before in other videos, but it is about 3 by 3 meters in terms of its width. And there's a few little bits and bobs sticking out here and there. What's interesting about this one is that the doors are actually fore and aft and stern, front and back. I don't know my ship terms, but in some of the recreated 3D models, you've seen the SRVs and stuff live to the side. So obviously if they keep to this orientation, they'll have to put the SRVs front and behind of the cargo bay itself. Nothing stopping them changing that, of course, but that's the way it looks at the moment. Now, of course, the entire main reason to get this thing in the first place is the ridiculous guns. Now, these are 2 huge hardpoints which we have seen in other videos before, but they are actually ridiculously massive, and I think I can probably stick myself into one. Let's see what happens. Yeah, there we are. So that gives you a view of the sort of interior, for want of a better word, of the actual large cannon, one of them anyway, and how it's held on by those pipe struts. And of course, seeing them deploy and retract, especially in VR, is a thing to behold. I think retracted, the whole thing, just the gun itself is about 10 meters long, which is a bit insane. And obviously once it's deployed, it just becomes even more gargantuan. Now, this entire rig is breaking the rules of physics quite heavily, because there is no way that a thing this big and this heavy would be able to deploy as rapidly as it is. But there you have it. And of course the obligatory fire test. Now those cannons do jerk around quite a bit. That's probably going back about 20 to 30 centimeters with each shot. That gives you an idea of how ridiculously big the shells are that these things are spewing out. And there, from that view, you can confirm that it is shooting 2 shells per 2 barrels. So it's shooting the 2 top barrels and then the 2 bottom barrels in synchronization. So there we are, friends, the Shark attached to a torpedo with missiles and guns on it, with a cannon pointed out of its mouth. It is a bit of a ridiculous ship, but certainly an awesome one for combat and piracy, or pirate hunting indeed, and probably for combat zones, as long as you stick in some turrets, because the maneuverability is not quite as fast as some of the other ships. Now, personally, I love the Corvette for its looks, for the feel, for the feel, literally, of just being in this massive battle cruiser and chugging your way through space, just armed to the teeth. It's a bit ridiculous, but I love ridiculous. So we have now reached, and this in fact is episode 30 of my walkthroughs of ship videos. It's been a fun journey so far. We've still got a few more to go, so I'm not giving up yet. But please let me know if there's something specific in Elite Dangerous that you want me to look at in VR. Whether you want me to fly inside the Farragut class battle cruisers or any of that sort of stuff, see if we can see anything of the interior of those. Stuff on planet surfaces, I don't know. I can't guarantee that I'll get to it, but I want your ideas as to what I'm going to produce next. Because as you can see from the view numbers, there are some videos that have tanked, and there are some videos that have got a heck of a lot of views, and presumably it's just down to people's favorite videos. But beware that some of the other videos have got some hidden extras in them that you won't find elsewhere. So for example, the Orca video has got stuff about how tall the statues are inside the spaceports and stuff like that. So there's a few bits and bobs hidden inside each video. So do go back and have a look at the entire catalog. In the meantime, as I say, there's still a handful of ships that I have to go through, and I will definitely be doing that. And thank you so far for joining me on this journey to 30 videos so far, which is a bit crazy actually, to think that I've now done this 30 times and that you guys have watched this 30 times. So I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Fly safe, Commanders.